In this episode of the Smart Community Podcast, Zoe speaks with Sampo Hietanen, the founder and CEO at Mass Global, the world's first mobility-as-a-service company. Zoe and Sampo discuss his background in transport planning and what sparked his interest in the smart community space, as well as how Finland is embracing smart concepts, including working towards a life where citizens don't actually need a car. Sampo explains what mobility as a service is and how his company, Mass Global, came to be. He also shares a bit about its success in a relatively short period of time in Finland and their plans to go live in other cities around the world, including Sydney. Zoe and Sampo explore why mobility as a service can only work when there is integration across different suppliers and systems, and the importance of building trust with both the end user and mobility providers in order to facilitate that integration. They finish the conversation talking about the question we really should be asking about mobility in our communities and how cities can be a part of that. As always, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
Welcome to the smart community, smart regions, smart towns, and smart cities. It's where we live, work, and play. With smart communities, the future starts today. Big data, smart mobility, emerging trends galore. The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.
So hello, Sampo. How are you today?
Hi. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, you too. Let's jump straight in. And can you tell us about your background and what you're passionate about?
My background, I'm a civil engineer from Helsinki University or Aalto University Technology from transport planning, although I've never done a single, let's say, honest transport planner job. It's always been about getting these new type of businesses up and running, really saving the world with new technology.
Yeah, wow. Sounds interesting. What sparked your interest in this smart cities or smart community space?
Well, from the background with transport, and then I know what kind of a trouble it is for the kind of a burden for cities, but also for the environment. But I also understand that the whole idea of us being free, having the freedom of mobility is an important thing. And unless you get something as convenient or that brings about the same freedom as what the car has been providing, then there's not much opportunity. And kind of comparing, actually, it was a revelation, I think 2006. I had been setting up business for traffic information. And then I had to give a speech about what technology will bring to our beloved transport sector. And I was on a plane from London and I had a couple of too many champagnes. And I started comparing the telecom industry and the disruption that had been ongoing from the 80s in that sector and said, okay, what do we draw analogies from that? And it started looking like a bigger and bigger thing that what if we were to have mobility operator, what kind of an impact would that have for cities? And then realized that, hey, we could actually give people the same sense of freedom, the same sense of anywhere, anytime on a whim, but without so much hassle that we have now.
Yeah, I'm really keen to get into mobility as a service, but I think I'll start with these overarching questions first, and then we'll run through those, and then we'll jump into mobility as a service because I'm really keen for you to dive deep into that. But what is a smart community to you?
Well, a smart community, if I really put it bluntly, a smart community or a smart city is something that allows the people not to be too smart. I mean, that the environment and all the designs are such that you don't have to worry. You don't have to be extremely smart. Now, if we look at the city now, we have to be pretty smart. We have to have sort of an idea of the map of the city. We have to understand where the motorways are. We have to understand quite a lot about these things. I would say a smart community, a smart city allows us to focus on other things and just enjoy the environment over there, which is not so much the case at the moment.
Interesting. I like that concept. Why do you think that this concept, this smart community, smart city concept is important?
It is exactly of that the things we love, the things we want have come with too much of a cost. I mean, we restrict ourselves because we want this connectivity. We want to be able to reach any address at any time. And we've been doing that with the dream, which is actually a really powerful dream. That, hey, if you have a car, you have access to everywhere. Now, this is great for the individual, but the infrastructure needed if everybody wants and needs to pursue the same dream just becomes quite a, well, let's say the whole city outlook and the way that it's constructed after that does not fulfill our dream of the city in let's say, in a short range. I mean, you like to connect, you like your car, but you don't like all those motorways next to your house. You'd like a greener environment where you can walk, where you can bike, where you can be happy. But yes, you'd want to reach everything. And it's been this balance where I would say that the idea, the concept of the car has prevailed. And I just actually a week ago, I went to New York for, there was a Cooper Hewitt's Smithsonian Design Museum, and they had about smart cities, and Wim was present there as well. But I saw the original design Futurama from, I think it was somewhere in the 30s, where they made this dream of, okay, the modern city where you have, housing here, industry here, recreation here, and the car to connect it all. We're still living that same vision. It had no real justification, but it was a big dream, and we all went for it. We built mighty highways almost everywhere, which is something that everybody can relate to and say, wow, we built this thing. And I get it. Just that the thing is that to provide the same dream for everyone is just almost impossible in the modern city.
Yeah, it's a real balancing, or two things that are competing that we really have to start thinking about in the smart communities and smart cities that are coming up. And then that retrofitting of like, okay, we've got this now. How can we use this more effectively and more efficiently?
Yeah, and there's the underlying vision, the greater vision behind it, which is that, okay, everybody needs to be connected. Then there's a bit of a flaw that transport planners and urban planners have, is that we treat the traffic in the same formula as we do wastewater. We put people and these cars into pipes and we think that that's how it works. But people are much harder to manage than water.
Yeah, they don't quite go the same way every time.
Yeah, it is about also creating things that you have to lure people. People do what they want, and they're supposed to be doing that. And once you build a lot of roads, they will ride those roads. You give them good opportunities, and they will do differently. And in many ways, I think for the whole smart city planning, one of the key issues is that it needs to be sold to individuals. Otherwise, you can't really solve that.
How do you think Finland is embracing this concept?
Well, I kind of like the idea that, first of all, the vision is to enable a similar disruption. It's going to happen anyway. I mean, the macroeconomics of this is so big that since the car consumes 76% out of the spend and it's only used 4% of the time, someone will definitely crack this formula by bringing the same freedom that the owned car has brought for so many years. But what I like about the Finnish approach is that it hasn't been done in a way that, okay, either the government will try to do it. It's been done in a way that, no, there will be, like with cars, you get to choose your operator or you get to choose who you get these things from. So it's an open, competitive market. But at the same time, it's regulated in a way that it works for the end user benefit. And I also like the approach that let's first try it with that there's many European cities that are about to ban cars from the inner city. Politically, it's going to be really hard to do. I like the approach that, hey, let's try to make it, and I like the Helsinki's approach that let's try to make it so that you can live a perfectly good life without being forced to own a car, which is actually the case for many at the moment. The urban planning forces you to own a car and to purchase a car if you want, let's say, a good enough life.
Okay, so tell us about some of the projects and things you're currently working on, and please tell us all about Mass Global. But then after that, if you can do a deep dive into what mobility as a service is and means.
All right, so can I start it the other way around, what the mobility is?
Yes.
It's kind of embedded in the story of Mass Global just as well.
That'd be perfect.
The whole idea is to be able to have enough fallbacks, have enough supply, enough density in the supply, and enough versatile supply to be able to guarantee the end users that, yes, we can take care of all your journeys. When people ask me how would I define mobility as a service and how does it differ from just being route planner or ride hail or something like that, it's the thing that, when you go and buy your car, you're not thinking about your next ride. You're not thinking about your next week's ride. You're thinking a year ahead. So unless we as mass operators can guarantee that we can take care of all your rides for a year. We're not really there. We're not as big in the minds of people as owning a car. And that's what it's all about, is to put everything else together to actually be able to let you live the life that you deserve without any hassle in it. So that, I would say, defines mobility as a service, is that you have enough supply, you have all the supply needed to cover all the trips for at least a year. So then how did Mass Global come about? I was actually working for a nonprofit for a while, just to boost the whole idea that, hey, there's much more that we can do with technology. It doesn't have to be that it just supports the existing industries, but it can change the whole structures. And the concept mobility as a service started from 2011, when it started to be at the core of Finnish transport policy. It started spreading and become a global, let's say, movement already. And somewhere in the end of 2014, people started asking me, could this really work as a business? And I had to say, I have no idea of that, but let's see. And about 24 different organizations chipped in and put some money to make an actual business plan, because everybody was so keen on the mobility as a service. But when I asked, so who's going to actually bring it to the end user, do the user experience and sell it and package it? And everybody was looking at ceiling and saying, well, could someone else do that? So we had to, since it was the last missing part of the ecosystem, is the one that carries it all the way to the end user. Someone had to do it. Not that we'd be the only ones in the world, but someone had to lead the way and show that, okay, this is how it would really look like for the end users. And started setting that up. So by 2016, I suppose probably because people wanted that I'd stop talking and shut up, because I've already given over 2,000 speeches about this, gave me money and said, okay, go out and do it then. And so we've been doing it from 2016 to prove point by point that it's doable. It's been quite a surprise and amazing that we have the likes of Toyotas and Denzos and Transdevs and so many others that have joined and invested into this, seeing that, okay, well, this one way or another, this will be the future. And it's been even more amazing, for someone who's been the village idiot talking about this concept for a while, to see that it really does work. People really do love the whole concept. They do love to have it that way.
So in Helsinki, it's operating like fully operational, or are you still in like trial and pilot phase?
It's fully operational. Of course, it's not ready. We need a lot more different types of supply to continue, and we need to carry the whole Finland to really go closer to the vision. But it's got, I think, 6% of the population already uses it, which is amazing for quite a short time. That we've been here. It's also live in Birmingham. It's live in Antwerp, and we're getting out to Vienna, Singapore, Sydney, and quite many others this year. So it's time to check it out. How does it work in other places?
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. And I think it leads perfectly onto this next question, because obviously for mobility as a service, you need to integrate across different suppliers, government, all these different systems working together. So how do you think, or how did you integrate across those different areas that don't typically necessarily talk very well with each other?
Well, for the next couple of years, this will be the hardest question. I was asked by, I think, USA Today some years back that when do I think that this concept could be live? And I was honest in saying that it has to be about 2020. Here we are, 2019, and we've been live for some time now, and we're getting on faster than I expected. It's not easy. We're used to have this battle of modes, whether it's public transport or taxi or all of these things. And now they have to be in same service, actually, with the actual competition being the car ownership. Not the easiest of tasks, but we tried to make it easy by showing also. And we've been able to show that we actually can get people out of their cars. And if they do so, they will use much more public transport, much more taxis, car shares, car rentals, bike shares, all of this. Because, of course, the big money is out and they have more to spend for the actual services. Goes by showing. I would say that's the only way. And we need to be able to build trust. Everybody keeps on saying that data is the oil, but I don't really think so. Data is much cheaper than trust and much easier. For these types of concepts, these types of services, you really need to bring about trust. And for that, you just need to keep on showing all the time that, hey, we're worthy of that trust.
So that open, transparent kind of data part, you're going to collect data, but actually building trust and what that data will be used for and what data people need to give over to make it successful. Those things really need to be considered.
Exactly. And it's a much tougher game because in a way we have to be really good for the end user, focus on them, but at the same time to be able to have our product. We couldn't be in Sydney if the public transport there wouldn't like us, if the taxis wouldn't welcome us, if the car share wouldn't welcome us, if the car rentals wouldn't welcome us or the bike shares. And only by them trusting us enough to allow us to integrate them can we actually have even a product. I don't believe in this model that's mostly done by some of the big ride hails or big ones in this, that you try to control the whole value chain, because mobility is way too big for that. It's much more productive that we use the infrastructure that exists to create this mass.
Mm-hmm. What are the emerging trends that people aren't talking about enough?
I think it is about, everybody's talking about these different scooter shares or ride hails or all of this. They're not talking about that, putting all of them together in one. And I think that the biggest question for smart cities, but also for world economic growth for the next decades, is what would be big enough to compare with car ownership? I don't think we're yet there. We dare to ask that question, but it's not asked frequently enough, because that is the right question. You really need to go dig into that one. And it doesn't happen by forcing or planning. It happens by putting something better out there for the individuals. Excellent.
It's been so great to chat with you. Thanks so much for coming on to the podcast. Any last remarks that you'd like to make?
Well, I always like to do this. There are two things, transportation is the second largest expenditure after housing for people. It's a huge market and it will be disrupted. It would be naive to think that it wouldn't. The macroeconomics are big on that. Now, for cities, I would say that they kind of lost their idea of a beautiful city with the entrance of car into the city, and we'll build the motorways and they cut the city and doesn't make it convenient and there's a lot of emissions on it. This is a second chance, but the way that the market should look like should not be owned by me or us. That should be owned by the cities and governments. And now is the time to be active, because let's say not all the scenarios of future look really nice and bright. There are really good possibilities in this, but now you have to be extremely active in making sure that the smart city that you wish is good for the citizens, it's good for the environment, it's good for business, and it's good for innovations. It can be done if you don't overly control, but at the same time, you take the lead as the city to show. In a way, I would say it's like a traditional marketplace. We're in a situation now where there's all kinds of fruit stands popping up here and there in the city, and the city just yes or no, and it's becoming a chaos. Whereas a smart city lays the bricks, finds a marketplace right at the center of the city, lays the bricks, does the utilities there, shows people that, hey, this is a great place for business, great place for market, but it's in a nice controlled way so that it's fair and competitive to everyone. And now it's the time to set this scene for the new mobility. But it does take active role.
Excellent. Thanks again for coming on to the podcast. I really just have one last question, which is, how can people connect with you?
All right. You can go to www.maas.global. My own email address is sampo.hietanen@maas.global. I'm relatively good in answering, so those would be it. Check out in Twitter. I'm in Twitter and LinkedIn, where you can check me out as well. I try to post all kinds of news into it so that you'll get understanding at least what we're trying to achieve.
Excellent. Well, thanks again for coming on to the podcast, Sampo. It's been absolutely amazing to speak with you, and I look forward to our next conversation. Just about to head overseas and research smart mobility, so I think we'll have to have another chat.
Cool. It was really great talking to you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart Community Podcast. Show notes for this episode and all other episodes are available on our website, mysmart.community. If you have any questions for us or any of our guests, you can email hello@mysmart.community or find us on the socials. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter @SmartComPod. That's com with 2 M's. If you are enjoying the podcast, please leave us a rating and review at wherever you listen. This really helps us reach more ears, so thank you in advance. As always, I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed making it.
The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.